Hi guys, I wanted to talk about a movie today. If you grew up in the evangelical space, you definitely know about this movie. It is God's Not Dead. I've only seen this movie once, I believe, and it is when I was a Christian. And yes, I did think it went hard. I thought it was very amazing when I watched it as a Christian. Um, I had recognized I hadn't watched it since then, and in my mind, I was like, there has to be a lot of propaganda in this movie that I did not see when I was a Christian. So I wanted to go back, take notes, and tell you guys what I thought about the movie. I barely remembered anything about this movie for some reason. Only like the main message, I suppose. So if you're interested in that, stick around. We're about to get started. If I sound congested, if I sound labored in breathing, it's because I was just filming with my guinea pigs for my other channels, and when I do that, I have this reaction because I'm allergic to my guinea pigs and my hay. Bummer, but yeah, that's why I sound like this, so bear with me. As always, I'm going to be looking at my notes over here. Let's start. So, if you've watched the movie, you know a lot of the big scenes are within a classroom when it comes to a student and an atheist professor debating on whether God is dead or not, or God is real or not. So the first classroom scene opens with the big, scary atheist professor trope. An intellectual who is too smart for his own good. If you guys know the stereotype I'm talking about, where they do this thing where like this atheist is so smart, or they are so knowledgeable yet they can't find out the truth, if you guys know what I mean. It's kind of a weird stereotype I've seen people talk about in the past, and kind of like almost having too much knowledge and having too much education isn't good for you. It very much adds up to the demonization of education in college in modern day with Christian nationalism. They really like to demonize college and say it brainwashes you and turns you liberal and makes you not believe in God, blah 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 blah. Anyways, the professor tells the students they have to write "God is dead" on a piece of paper.
There is no God. God is dead.
Which is just wild, because I can't really imagine a professor forcing everyone to denounce their faith if they are in a faith. Doesn't matter if they're Muslim or like Hindu or Christian or whatever. I just can't imagine that being an acceptable thing. But beyond that, he tells students they must write "God is dead" on a piece of paper and then sign it to be able to get some kind of grade in the class. And Josh, the main college student in the movie, refuses. And the professor says, okay, well, if you're going to refuse to write "God is dead," then you're going to have to defend him existing, God existing. So anyways, that first classroom scene is them setting up the picture of this student is going to go in every class and basically give a lecture on why he thinks God is not dead, and I guess the professor is going to grade him on that. So in between these debates, we also have other things happening in the movie. So after the first classroom scene, we have a reporter reporting or interviewing a guy from Duck Dynasty. I don't know a lot about Duck Dynasty. I know they're very like Christian based kind of. The reporter's interviewing a guy from Duck Dynasty, and the guy from Duck Dynasty, I don't know his name, he's portrayed as very chill, very laid back, very happy. Portrayed as just this really kind, awesome, chill dude. And this reporter is portrayed as like very insufferable and miserable and being like, well, why would you believe in God? Like, it's just kind of weird because they make her very combative right away, which we know is because she's an atheist. So of course they're going to paint her that way. So there's that scene. After that, we have a Muslim girl. As soon as I saw the Muslim girl, I already knew what was about to go down.
You're beautiful. I wish you didn't have to do that.
Here's the thing. Me being someone who criticizes religion, I have my own thoughts on that. But because this is a Christian movie, I already knew the direction it was going. And there's a lot of what do I want to say? A lot of like kind of hatred towards Muslims in the evangelical space. So right away I was like kind of rolling my eyes at this, because why did you have to include this? We know why, but whatever. The girl says that to her, and then the Muslim girl's dad pulls up and he picks her up from school. And right away, they make it seem like the girl is really afraid of her father. But the father and her have like kind of a normal conversation, and he warns her about Christians. So there's that scene. Okay, so that night, after the professor gives Josh, the main college kid, the assignment of proving God's not dead, he is in his room and reading from the Bible, basically saying, if you deny God before man, then God will deny you. Basically saying, I need to stand up for my faith. So then we get to Josh's first actual argument in the class, where he's, the very first time he's actually presenting. Josh begins his defense by saying no one can disprove God's existence, which, okay. Then he argues that the Big Bang shows something came from nothing. Classic argument from Christians who say that atheists believe something came from nothing. But he says it makes more sense to believe that God created everything. And then he talks about how atheists reject this idea that something came from nothing, except for the Big Bang. They make a special plea for the Big Bang. Then you have a student in the class who says, so where did God come from then? And he said, well, God is beyond space and time. You kind of know the narrative there. And it's so interesting because right before that, he was saying that atheists make this special plea for the Big Bang, and yet then right after that, he makes a special plea for God doesn't need a beginning. God doesn't need a creator. So he's letting himself have that exception, but not anybody else, even though I don't know a single atheist who believes everything came from nothing. And he talks about gaps in knowledge we have, and he just says it makes more sense to put God in there. That's what makes it make sense, is that like we're just going to put something in that space, the God of the gaps fallacy, and that makes sense to me. That was basically his argument. Which, yes, a lot of us have heard that before, but we're perfectly okay with the fact that we don't know everything. There were many, many times throughout history where people thought the supernatural or God was responsible for something, and we found out later that's not the case. The one that always comes to my mind first is seizures. People long time ago, not even that long ago, used to think seizures was somebody being possessed or a demon was in them, something supernatural or something biblical or whatever. We found out later that's not true. There are reasons people have seizures. So we do this throughout history, and every single time so far, when we have made a discovery, we've discovered it's not that. So to me, it makes more sense to assume it's not something supernatural or God, because every time we do make a discovery, we find that answer to something. Does that mean we have the answer for every single thing right now? No. But history has shown us that every time we do think something is strictly because of the supernatural or God or whatever, we later find out an answer that isn't that. So it seems more logical to me to assume in that direction. So the professor finds Josh after class. He's kind of like running after him. And he starts basically bullying Josh.
Do you think you're smarter than me, Wheaton?
Why? I don't know. He's basically like, hey, young man, don't try and sound smarter than me in class. And then he says he threatens to ruin Josh's academic career if he continues challenging him. So he's starting to ruin Josh's academic career if he continues to do the assignment that he gave Josh. Makes a lot of sense, right?
I will make it my personal mission to destroy any hope of a law degree in your future.
Then somewhere in the movie, Josh's girlfriend breaks up with him for having this challenging debate with his professor. I genuinely don't know why. She keeps on saying stuff like, your priorities aren't straight, blah, blah, blah. I feel like they just did this to make it seem like it's like such a struggle to stand up for your faith and you'll lose people along the way. But it honestly made zero sense why she broke up with him. It was very strange and odd to me. Okay, so now back to the Muslim girl's subplot. The Muslim girl falls asleep listening to some kind of Christian podcast or Christian reading of the Bible, and her little brother comes in the room and looks at her iPod or phone or whatever and sees that she's listening to something Christian. Gasp. He tells the dad at some point, and the dad comes in and basically starts assaulting her. And then he throws her out of the house while she cries out, "Jesus is my Lord and Savior!"
This is my Lord and Savior, and he died to save me from my sins.
Being persecuted for her faith and all of that. I won't lie to you. Okay. The scene with her and her dad seem like they're feeding into specific stereotypes where they're having the dad be super physically abusive. And there's this really weird scene where he like grabs her butt, like he's like kicking her out of the house, but then when they're outside, there's this really uncomfortable moment where he's like holding her by the neck. I don't know if it's supposed to be like he's debating on killing her or what. It is very, very bizarre. Then in this movie, we get into some of the personal life of the professor, of course. There's this dinner party scene where he is dating a former student. There's a lot of weird connections of like how everyone's like related in this movie. I'm not going to go over all that because it was just a lot, but I'm going to give you the gist, the overall view of it. He is dating a former student. Another ethically weird detail, like making him seem like more immoral. At this dinner party, he mocks Josh's class presentation, and of course he's around all of his super smart, intelligent, educated, friends, and they're all laughing with him like, haha, what a fool. Like, then his girlfriend, his ex-student girlfriend, stands up in front of like the friend group and is like, hey, I believe in God. The whole room gets quiet, and then everybody stares at her, of course.
But I actually believe in God.
I feel like this movie uses this scene to depict atheists as like smug elitists who ridicule people's faith and are just like so mean and will like just persecute the shit out of you. And then it's funny because the whole time I was watching this movie, I was like, the issue isn't that the professor's atheist. The issue is that the professor is a jerk and abusive towards this girl. But they kind of make it seem like he is abusive and a jerk towards this girl because he is atheist. And that's where I see an issue. So on top of the Muslim girl subplot, there's a lot of subplots. On top of the Muslim girl subplot, there's also this Chinese student subplot. Now, I had to laugh and roll my eyes when they also showed a Chinese student. And the reason for that is, if any of you grew up in the evangelical space, there were two people that were kind of like always I don't know what to even like criticize, maybe is the word, for their culture. Two of them very, very much big ones were Muslims and Chinese people, or like China in general, because they said that like China's so dangerous and Christianity is illegal, like just like, you know what I mean. They really harped on those things because they felt persecuted by those two groups of people, or felt like they were like the antithesis of Christianity. I don't know. So of course they put a Chinese student in with the mix. It's just it's very weird. It's just not a coincidence to me that they inserted a Muslim and a Chinese student. Like it's, the Chinese student sees Josh around campus and asks him about God because, he's in the class where Josh is presenting this argument about why God's not dead. And at some point, this Chinese student calls his dad and he's like, there's this professor who says there's no God in my class. And the dad's like, okay, so whatever, what's the problem? The professor says there's no God, then there's no God. And the film just predicts the father. The father, he's having the phone call with the father, and the father is back in China, it looks like. And the film depicts the father as like controlling, closed-minded, like, I don't know, the typical like freedom versus oppression trope where Western Christianity equals truth and non-Western culture equals ignorance. Now we get to Josh's second argument in the class. Josh brings up Darwin, saying evolution explains how things can change after creation, but not how life began.
The origin of the universe unfolded exactly how one would expect after reading Genesis.
He suggests Genesis fills in that gap.
The Bible had it right, and science had it wrong.
It's unclear. I was kind of waiting for this. It's unclear whether or not he believes in evolution or if he's like a young earth creationist. It doesn't seem to give like a definitive thing that he believes. At least that's not what I got from it. After class, Josh and the professor, you guessed it, they had another spat. After class, the professor tries to bully Josh again, you know, because Josh is this innocent, amazing Christian standing up for his faith, and the atheist is a bully. So they're like fighting, and Josh asks,
What happened to you?
Because of course the professor, being an atheist and all, is being very bitter about life. The professor reveals his mother died when he was 12, and he begged God to save her. And when she didn't survive, he stopped believing.
God who would allow that is not worth believing in.
I just cannot believe this is happening right now.
Obviously, this is super annoying to see because it's lazy to me. It's so lazy. Like, the movie uses this as proof that atheists only exist because they're mad at God, not because they actually aren't convinced he's real. And a lot of Christian movies do this, where people are only atheists because they're bitter and miserable and like they're angry at something they think God did. No, it's never like they genuinely aren't convinced he's real. They never portray it that way. It dismisses anybody's real deconstruction experience or it dismisses any explanation as to why anyone would be atheist or not believe in God. Let's jump back to the Muslim girl. She's thrown out of her house and she like ends up at this church basically to seek refuge. And the pastor tells her how courageous she is for standing for her faith for so long, because they said she's been hiding it from her father for a year. And then the pastor talks about like how God won't forget this. Basically, you're suffering for Christ. God won't forget this. You will be rewarded for this. This glamorization of suffering for God, being persecuted. Christians have this idea a lot of times that persecution equals good. Persecution equals being a good Christian. Without persecution, a lot of people don't feel like they're actually like doing what God wants them to do, because to be persecuted is to be following what God wants you to do. The world's always going to persecute you. And I think that's a big reason they have the Muslim girl and her Muslim family being abused and standing up for God. So now we're back at school. Josh runs into the atheist professor in the elevator. There's a lot of awkward tension. We are going into the class where Josh is going to make another argument to his class about why God's not dead. He claims atheists can't have true morality without God, saying life would be meaningless otherwise. And it's just obviously frustrating because the atheist professor doesn't really say anything of value, no good argument back. And I mean, obviously that's going to happen. It's a Christian movie, whatever. The professor then calls Christianity a virus, and quickly the hostility escalates. And Josh asks the professor,
Do you hate God? Why do you hate God? Answer the question.
and the professor screams back,
Because he took everything away from me. All I have for him is hate.
Josh delivers the sickest line of the movie, which is,
How can you hate someone if they don't exist?
how can you hate someone who doesn't exist? Like I don't like Voldemort. Like I don't like kind of any other villain in a story. So anyways, after that sick burn that Josh gives the professor of how can you hate someone who doesn't exist, the class falls silent. And one by one, every student stands up and declares, God's not dead. Even the Chinese student.
God is not dead.
It's a big emotional payoff. It abandons logic, and instead it's like this cinematic triumph of like, atheists are irrational and you believe in God, but you just hate him. So now we're going to skip to this subplot that has been marinating that honestly I didn't really touch on because I didn't care that much. But we're going to talk about it for a specific reason. Basically, the professor's girlfriend her mother has had dementia. And the son of the mother with dementia, so the professor's girlfriend's brother, didn't ever want to like come visit his mom because he didn't see a point because she had dementia, I guess. And her son is just the biggest POS and asks the mother, why is it that you believe in God and you end up like with dementia and basically have a crappy life, but I don't believe in God and my life's like perfect and I have all this stuff going for me. Just being like an absolute POS to his mom for some reason. Again, probably because he's atheist. And he's like mocking her in front of her face and asking why God would let her suffer. Out of nowhere, she tells him that sometimes the devil gives some people good lives so they don't turn to God until time runs out. So she's saying the reason he has a good life is because the devil decided to give him a good life. Which, when I heard that, I was like, thinking about the fact that, especially like evangelicalism, I'm not sure about some other types of Christianity, they give the devil so much power that I feel like the Bible doesn't actually say that he has, but he's like this extremely powerful force that apparently will give you a super good life, so you never ask if God is real or never turn to God, which is like, in my mind, I'm like, wait, why would God let Satan manipulate people to that level where it's like they're not really given a chance to believe in God then? It's super bizarre. But basically she's like, well, time's gonna run out for you. Like, he's gonna end up in hell. And then after she says all that, she forgets everything again and is like, what? Like, goes back to her dementia. Like, this is just a snippet of her remembering something. You know, she forgets everything but remembers God because, like, that's the one true truth, I guess. It's interesting. This is not the first time I've heard people say stuff like this. I have seen videos in the past where, like, videos that are supposedly real, whether they're real or not, I don't know, where a dementia patient will forget everything that they've ever remembered, even their loved ones and their kids, but they'll remember Jesus and the message of Christianity. And it's kind of messed up, that idea that people give when it comes to dementia patients. Using illness as a sermon device, I feel like it's pretty sick in a lot of ways. It feels bleak and manipulative to me. Okay, so there's another subplot. There's so many subplots in this movie again. There's one subplot I haven't really been talking about, and that's the reporter I was talking about who was an atheist, who is basically like just, they make her seem miserable and insufferable like they do every single atheist in this movie. And this whole time during this movie, she's like, finds out she has cancer and she's battling cancer. I also want to note that while they're showing her battling cancer, she was dating the son of the woman who had dementia, the one who was atheist. He ends up breaking up with her because she has cancer and basically says, love's overrated, it's transactional. And I feel like in that moment, they were trying to make it seem like atheists do not know what love is, so this is how shallow it is for them. I don't know what other reason there was for that, besides that message specifically. Anyways, so the reporter, you know, she's having a crisis because she believes she's dying. This is towards the end of the movie. She goes and meets the Newsboys, which is a Christian band I'm sure a lot of you guys know. So she goes to interview the Newsboys, this Christian band, and she's again portrayed as rude and bitter and miserable. Eventually they all pray for her to get saved. And she's like happy, I guess, at the end, and they're all happy for her. That's her happy ending. Now, we're going to get to what happens to the professor at the end of this movie. He gets hit by a car. He gets destroyed by this car, and it reminded me exactly of this meme. And I had seen this meme before, and I didn't even realize it was supposed to be about this movie because the professor gets hit by the car, and it's a Newsboys song playing in the background.
God's not dead, he's surely alive. He's living on the inside, growing like a light.
This professor gets hit by the car. He's laying on the ground, and a pastor that was throughout the movie, he comes out of nowhere and is like holding him, and he's like, basically, accept God right now.
God that you don't believe in has given you another chance to change your final answer.
And so like then he turns to God at the end of his life.
Do you accept him as Lord and Savior?
Yes.
Which is very much, there's no atheist in foxholes type thing. It's this idea in Christianity that nobody's an atheist at the end of their life if they get the chance. Like, everyone at the end of their life is so scared, so they will always call out to God at the end of their lives. Is that accurate? Is that true? Do they have proof for that? No, they do not. Not saying nobody's done that, obviously, but this idea that nobody dies an atheist if they have the choice is just made up. That no atheist in foxholes thing is completely made up. That's how we get that myth about Charles Darwin professing his belief in God at the end of his life, which did not happen. But anyways, that's what they portray towards the end, is like the atheist professor got that chance to turn his life over to God. And they show his scene of him dying where he's like, I really don't want to die. They prey on this emotion of fear and not wanting to die and like cease to exist or burn in hell, whichever one you want to go with. So at the very end of the movie, there's the Newsboys concert, and the guy from Duck Dynasty shows up on the screen, and he's like, hey Josh, I heard about your debate with your professor about God being real.
We've heard in the news that there's been a bit of a squabble down there on campus.
The crowd is like cheering, and then the guy from Duck Dynasty is like, text everyone you know, God's not dead.
Text them 3 simple words: God's not dead.
With a call to evangelize. Obviously, I've been giving my input during the whole movie, but I want to talk about the couple of things that bother me the absolute most in this movie. Number one is echoing modern rhetoric about education and knowledge and stuff like that. Just demonizing it without fully saying it. And this happens a lot in evangelicalism, the demonization of education and teachers, and this is very much intertwined with this movie. Now, I don't think it's to the level that it is today, but you can see it coming up in this movie during this time, and it has just gotten worse. The second thing that really bothers me is the portrayal of atheists. Now, whenever they get the professor to basically say, oh, I hate God because my mom died and I'm just a bitter, sad man about it, and I really do believe in God, but I hate him because I didn't get my way. It reminded me of when I went to read the book, The Case for Christ, and the author of that book basically says at the beginning of his book, is basically living a bad life by being an atheist, and I looked it up, and this is actually what he said during an interview about when he used to be an atheist. He said, well, I was a narcissist, a hedonist, and I was a heavy drinker. I was self-absorbed, self-destructive in many ways. I was an atheist. The movie God's Not Dead very much feeds into that stereotype of, I'm a jerk, I abuse my girlfriend, I'm a bitter person, I'm mean, I'm rude to my mother with dementia, I mock her, like, I'm all these things because I'm an atheist. And it's just so disgusting, in my opinion, because they're always painting atheism as a moral failing. It's not like they don't believe something we believe, it's they are immoral human beings because they are atheists. And it's obviously really distasteful to people who don't believe just because they don't believe. And the fact that the author of The Case for Christ said, I was a narcissist, I was a hedonist, I was a heavy drinker, I was self-absorbed, I was self-destructive, I was an atheist. I think that's my biggest issue with this movie and how they portray everybody who's different than them. And on top of that, what I was talking about with the Chinese student's father and then the Muslim girl and her family, just basically, they're just awful, you know? They beat their kids, they don't listen to their kids, they're dismissive, whatever. It's really frustrating to see. Again, it's frustrating to see both the Muslim girl and the Chinese student because those are two specific groups of people I heard them talk about all throughout growing up in evangelicalism. I feel like the main message of the movie is intellectualism is dangerous, faith is under attack, and Christians must fight back because they are being so heavily persecuted in the United States, which people still act like that today, even with Christian nationalism taking over our entire country, and Trump only being interested in protecting Christians, rolling back everything DEI, but yet writing a whole page on the White House website about how he needs to protect Christians from persecution, even though they are the most powerful group of people in the United States. Don't Think God's Not Dead isn't a debate. It's a sermon disguised as one. And once you see how it manipulates emotion and identity, you start to realize it's not defending the faith, it's defending fear. And you see how much it's defending fear by the main thing happening at the end is that professor dying and being afraid of dying. They want people to have that emotion of, well, I don't want to die. I don't want to cease to exist, or I don't want to burn in hell. Like, I want to have a good afterlife. That is what they are feeding on in that movie. It's not so much that the kid just like brought all these really good logical arguments to the table and convinced people God was real. It was more like they fed on fear, they fed on stereotypes, they fed on the persecution complex. So yeah, that's my take on God's Not Dead. Depending on how you guys feel about this video, I kind of want to watch the second, third, and fourth. Had no idea there were movies past the first one, and I'm pretty interested to see how those are portrayed and how they develop with each one and what each one is about. Let me know if you guys have watched them, if you think I should watch them, and give a commentary on that. Have you guys rewatched this movie after deconstructing? How do you view it now? How has your thoughts changed about this movie? What did you see that you didn't see before? I would like to know in the comments. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this. It was enjoyable for me to watch it and see how my mind has changed about so many different things, and seeing things that I definitely did not see before when I was a Christian watching the movie. It was pretty wild. I think it's important to know how propaganda is slipped in little ways without maybe a lot of people noticing it. But this movie was definitely a play on emotion and fear, and not so much actually bringing to the table a good argument for God. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this, and I will see you in the next one.